So, Nandan, you have been in the leadership role in the Indian tech industry for many years now. And with the advent of AI, while here in America we've all been sort of obsessed with ChatGPT and, our AI robot's going to come kill us someday, you have been thinking more about the practical implications of this for India and how it could change your healthcare system, your education system. So I wanted to get a sense from you, what kind of impact do you think this technology could have for your country?
No, I think there's a lot less introspection on AI and its harms out there, because people actually are seeing the beneficial side of it. And I think we have, the last 15 years in India, we have built something called digital public infrastructure at population scale. So 1.3 billion people have a digital ID, and we have a payment system that does 13 billion transactions a month and so on. And now we're seeing AI the logical culmination or the logical next orbit of that. I'll give you a few examples. One very important one is language. India is a country where people speak maybe 300, 400 languages. There are 22 official languages. And the number of people who speak English is actually just a small percentage. And so the people who don't speak English or who can't key into a keyboard or even do a swipe, they're not able to access computing. And one of the things now we have is we have a complete Indian language open source stack for 22 Indian languages for voice. So people can now talk to the computer in the language of their choice and get answers back. And suddenly that opens up huge possibilities for them. So that's just one example of how access that was not there now becomes accessible. So there are many, many things like that. So I think there's a huge play, and over the next 4 or 5 years, you're going to see some amazing applications of AI at the scale of population, which actually makes a difference to the lives of human beings.
And I know one of the things you had talked about before was in education and the teacher shortage that India is facing. How can AI play a role in educating students?
Sure. In fact, often when we think of education, we think of helping people who are already literate learn new things, right? So you have a smartphone app or some edtech app or all that. But what we are finding in India, and it's true in all parts of the world, is many people can't even read. And if you can't read in this world of AI, you're going to be further left behind. So our first use of AI is for assisted language learning tool. And my foundation has rolled it out in 6,000 schools, where kids go into a lab. And this AI is like a diagnostic that it's using speech recognition. It recognizes which letters you're stumbling on, which verbs you're stumbling on, and creates a sort of a picture like a EEG of your knowledge, and then helps you in a very empathetic manner to become better. And we're seeing already children are learning to read. This is not English, their own mother tongue, they're not able to read. So imagine if we can do that at the scale of everyone, and we can improve literacy and numeracy. This is huge.
And in terms of the technology and who is building this, is it based on sort of open source models that are already available and they're sort of fine-tuning them?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. On this Indian language thing, we have actually built our own open source. And it's not just open source, it's data. Because if you look at the internet, most of these models are trained on the internet, but it's whatever data is on the internet. And 99% of that is in English, so that doesn't solve a problem, right? So we have built tools which actually collect data in local languages at scale, like thousands of hours of spoken Tamil or English, Hindi or whatever. And then that is all being made available freely to anyone who wants it. If it's a startup or a large company, anybody can use this. So it's, you have to think, and of course the models themselves, there are many open source models now, which are there. And we think that our view is that over time, at least for the kind of use cases we have, the models will be widely available. It's really the data which is going to be the difference.
Yeah. And in terms of some of the concerns about this technology, bias concerns, other sort of privacy and other kinds of concerns, what are the things that most worry you, especially with some of the dynamics in India in terms of the different ethnicities, religions, concerns about Hindu nationalism, or how does that play out?
No, I think certainly, if it's just some wide open internet kind of application, that's a concern. But the things that I'm talking about are much more controlled in the sense they're trained on a specific set of data. It's not some random stuff. They are fine-tuned. They have lots of tools to reduce hallucinations. So I think there's a lot more focus on what is it trained on. I think all these issues start when you just go and you scrape the internet, you get the bias of the internet. We're not doing any of that.
And so are the models smaller, so they take up less energy resources, less compute?
I think smaller models have multiple benefits, right? One is they're widely available, they're open source models. They are cheap to run. They can be run in a way that data is right there. And because when you're trying to build societal AI, you're trying to solve a problem for 1 billion people. It can't be expensive to do an inference. It has to be very quick. So a lot of things have to go on the frugality of the design. So that's part of what is required to create societal AI, whether it's education or health or agriculture or language.
So are you seeing a wide range of businesses or other entities be able to tap this technology because it is cheaper and smaller?
Yeah, for example, I talked about this language AI, right? So we're making that available as a general purpose, open source, free tool. Now, we have a very popular payment system in India called UPI, which does about 13 billion transactions a month, real time, zero cost. About 500 million people use it. So it's transformed the lives of people. On that, now using this language AI, they're creating voice interfaces for payments. So instead of having to key it in, you can just tell the machine in your language to make a payment to your spouse or to your child who's studying abroad or studying in the city or whatever, and you can do that. So I think that's how the AI will then connect to an existing infrastructure and suddenly open up even more usability for people.
And what about how the technology should be regulated? There was a proposal floated about the AI makers of AI models needing to get approval for new features because of something that Google's Gemini model had said about Modi, and the government officials were upset about that. They pulled that, but how should the
I think that was pulled back, so I don't think it happened. No, I think, again, I think when you're looking at global models trained on data on the internet and all the biases come with it, that's something we need to think about. But the way we are thinking is, how do we use this extraordinary technology to allow children to learn a language, to allow a teacher to teach better, to allow a healthcare worker in a village to give better medical treatment and so on, to allow a farmer to get access to the latest information. And these are all bounded problems. They're not unbounded. You're working with a set of data which is relevant to that. So they're not really in that league. A lot of what you talk about applies to this Wild West internet stuff.
Yeah. So how do you think it should be regulated? What kind of rules of the road?
Well, I think, obviously we have to think of some guardrails, and I think there's a lot of people who feel that in the previous cycles of technology, they didn't pay enough attention, and then it became very difficult to regulate later. So they feel that this time they should do it upfront. But that's a risk also, because if you don't know what you're going to regulate, then you end up with issues. So I think I personally am a believer that you do need some basic guardrails, some lightweight regulation, but it's too early to make it very strict, because then you're going to suppress innovation. So it has to be an innovative architecture with light guardrails. And many of the things that AI does are actually covered under other laws. So you have to use those laws to regulate. You don't specifically need more. You may need some tweaking of the regulations, but I mean, there are laws on privacy. Oh well, not here, but there are laws on privacy. There are laws on censorship. There are laws on so many things. Health records.
Sure.
So, same things apply.
And what about worries about how the technology could be used to try to influence elections? Because obviously that's a big worry here, that you're facing same events in India.
Yeah, no, look, I think the fact is technology has been used to, impact elections in for quite some time. It's been happening here since the last 10 years. So I think this is just an acceleration of that. And there'll be more deep fakes, there'll be more synthetic voice of somebody, there'll be more misinformation. So I think that's something we need to think about. One of the ways to think about it at a scalable way is to think about having the provenance of every data on the system proven, so that we know that it's real stuff. And but that requires a massive architectural upgrade to the way we do things.
Yeah, and I wanted to also talk about India's sort of tech ecosystem, because obviously there's tons of startups there, a ton of people who study software engineering and other subjects where they go into the tech industry. How do you see India's position, especially as people are looking for alternatives to China, and there's an educated workforce? Do you see this as a way to create, a new kind of sector there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, India has three different things going for it. One is that it's become the largest location for global software development, and all the companies put together and captive units of large global companies from here that does about $250 billion of revenue. So it's a huge industry.
Yeah, I saw GitHub, like the most popular
GitHub
developers are all they use GitHub the most.
Because the Chinese have gone away from GitHub.
Yeah.
So they have their own GitHub. So it's just the Americans and the Indians left on GitHub. So I think huge number of developers, which of course global companies can take advantage of. So every day there's some new company that wants to open a center. Then a very thriving startup industry, and there are around 100,000 startups. And then there is this digital public infrastructure, which I was talking about: identity, payments, data empowerment. So all these three together have created a very vibrant and dynamic technology sector. And that sector will now get amplified with AI.
So what do you think is missing from that equation? Because there's some people where, Apple or others that are looking to manufacture there or develop software there, but there's a sense that, maybe the sort of supply chain ecosystem isn't there. Certain other things still need to be built up.
No, I think that's actually changed a lot. And, there's public information that Apple has gone from 0 to 5-6% of their phones are made in India. I think manufacturing is taking off. Infrastructure is improved. The ports are better. The containerization movement is better. Many of these factories are all women factories. So these companies which are contractors like Foxconn and others, they actually build dormitories, and girls come and stay and work. So there are no men there. They don't want men there, only women. So suddenly it's acted as a huge impetus for women's employment. So I think the manufacturing story is really changed a lot in India. Obviously, it doesn't have the extraordinary ecosystem that China built over the last 20 years, but it's definitely going to give a run for the money. And it'll be an important part of the overall India story. It won't be only manufacturing, but the services that I just talked about, manufacturing, and a massive consumer economy. India is a huge, 2/3 of Indian economy is domestic consumer economy. So it's much more balanced in that sense.
And we're almost out of time. I just wanted to also ask you about the war for talent and India being a prime place for Amazon, Google, Microsoft, a lot of these big technology companies, as there's sort of a race for AI talent, tons of money is being thrown at PhDs, and what kind of environment has that created in India? But with our immigration system here, can the United States fully take advantage of that?
Well, one is, of course, people coming here, but they can also take advantage by setting up centers there. But the good news is that between the universities and the companies, we have built the capability of training people at large scale. Like, we can train 100,000 employees on AI. So when you can do AI training at large scale using, again, AI tools, then you can get some of this done, because you're actually going to create a huge supply chain and pipeline of talent, and that's what is happening.
Right.
But there'll be a short-term point when demand for AI talent will be more than supply, but it'll catch up.
And just in our last moment, what is your biggest AI prediction for India? What do you think is going to be the biggest thing we'll see?
I think AI in the next 5 years will accelerate development and growth. And you can actually point to saying that this is because of AI that more children are educated, or healthcare is better, or economic growth is up by 1 percentage point, or whatever.
Great. Well, I'll ask you in 5 years if that came true.
Sure. If you invite me, I'll come back.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time.